Greetings everyone. It's been 75 days since lockdown, or as we call it, the MCO. And currently my name is Joe Onn, and I'm a university student, master's university student from City University PJ. And the reason why I'm wearing glasses right now is because that one of my left eye, is swollen. Mata kiri saya sekarang ni dia bengkak, dia sakit. So anyway, that's not the main point. And today I'll be presenting about my research paper, which is about establishing an assessment rubric for e-portfolio submissions in Malaysian secondary schools. First, I will explain a bit about the background to my study. This is a traditional classroom where a teacher-centric approach is applied. In a traditional classroom, the teacher talks, while the students are expected to pay attention. After a semester, the progress and level of students are judged solely by a written examination. As technology progresses and getting more and more advanced, this method of evaluating students' capabilities may not be too relevant in our current era, where the internet plays a dominant role in education. Students are able to explore different methods of learning, and the textbook and traditional classroom are not the only ways a student can explore and discover new knowledge. As more and more people spend time on their technological devices, electronical and digital content are dominant. The gaining popularity of the internet gave rise to a new way of evaluating students called the e-portfolio. An e-portfolio, or an electronic portfolio, is a collection of electronic evidence assembled and managed by a user online via blogs or website-making applications. Such electronic evidence may include text, electronic files, images, blog entries, and hyperlinks. As we progress into the 21st century, where learning becomes digitalized and distance online learning becomes a trend, school assignments can be submitted in this manner. This year, the outbreak of the coronavirus COVID-19 forced governments worldwide to implement a lockdown restricting movement of people. This disrupts the daily routine of students commuting to school to attend their classes in classrooms. Distance online learning becomes an inevitable choice. Schools no longer engage with students face-to-face and have switched online to arrest the spread of the disease. Traditional examinations are also replaced with other forms of assessments and evaluations, such as e-portfolios. There are concerns regarding the efficiency and accountability of online evaluation. Each alternative assessment, including e-portfolio, must be designed to ensure students achieve the designated learning outcomes. It is undoubtedly a fact that e-portfolios will nurture and develop intellectual capital for wealth creation, equipping Malaysia's next generation with the ability to think critically and creatively. It promotes conceptual learning, weaving global concepts, trends, and interdisciplinary themes into key subjects. Before we can make the e-portfolio system a reality in Malaysia's secondary schools, a fundamental aspect must be done, which is determining the evaluation rubrics for the students' submitted e-portfolios. This will become a major part of my study. Some universities in Malaysia, such as Taylor's University Subang Jaya, have long implemented the e-portfolio system for years. But the key question: are our secondary school students prepared for this groundbreaking implementation? Before we proceed into the research, we need to list out our problem statement. These are questions yet to be answered and should be answered as we progress into this study. Now, I'll give you some time to ponder upon these questions. The goal of this research is to come up with an assessment rubric that evaluates the e-portfolio submissions submitted by Malaysian secondary school students. Thus, I listed out 4 research objectives that serve as fundamental key factors that will guide myself throughout the synthesis of this paper. The research objectives I've listed out are: First, to understand and identify the criteria that makes an e-portfolio excellent. Secondly, to apprehend and investigate the intellectual and information technology literacy capabilities of Malaysia's secondary school students. Next, to identify outcomes to be expected from an e-portfolio submitted by a Malaysian secondary school student. And lastly, to establish an assessment rubric suitable to be implemented in secondary schools that corresponds with the social expectations towards our students. Now, I'll explain about the basis of my research design, which is built upon achieving the research objectives I've listed, and then relate the findings to one another. Here are the first two research objectives. By achieving these objectives, I can identify the criteria that makes an e-portfolio excellent, together with a full grasp of the level of IT literacy amongst Malaysia's secondary school students. By understanding the capabilities of secondary school students and knowing the requirements for an e-portfolio to be perceived as excellent, I can sketch out the outcomes to be expected from an e-portfolio produced by a Malaysian secondary school student. This ensures that the e-portfolio system implemented has realistic expectations towards our students, yet has a benchmark required to be achieved by them. The research finding allows us to set this benchmark. The research findings obtained by the first three objectives mentioned allows me to establish the assessment rubric. Okay, so how do we obtain the results that will help us achieve the objectives? As for the first objective, I use this approach. The definition of excellence in the e-portfolio is addressed qualitatively so that the so-called good or excellence in the context of e-portfolios can be identified. And to achieve this, we refer to relevant literature. Interviews are also done online to education industry professionals to determine the key factors that should be evaluated in an e-portfolio. And these interviews, they were done using semi-structured questions to gather the data. Next, the rough idea of how these questions are like is that we give the industry professionals several different choices, several different case studies of e-portfolios done by students. And the qualities of these e-portfolios are identified before handing them for them to judge and make their decision, as well as expressing their opinion. By interviewing the industry professionals, we can assure what sort of qualities should be embodied in an e-portfolio submission. To indicate the key major points required in an e-portfolio as a result of the study, a few statistical methods that suited the nature of the data and the aims of the study are deployed. For the rubrics, the percentage-based calculation was implemented. The differences were mapped into graphs and variances between the case studies that were observed. A combination of both qualitative, which is the literature studies, and quantitative, which is the gathering of objective data, through respondents are utilized. The second research objective lets us know the abilities of our students so that the expectations of their e-portfolio outcomes are realistic and achievable. This could be done by applying a quantitative approach, which is via questionnaires and interviews towards the evaluated people, the secondary school students. These collected data play an important role in helping us determine the skill sets equipped by our students. The method of data collection used is a Likert scale, which requires the secondary school students to fill in a fixed choice response format. Some questions may include testing their confidence in photo editing skills, video editing skills, and whether they have a blog. The collected data is then systematically and thoroughly analyzed. This allows us to adjust and balance between the expectations of a good e-portfolio to the level of secondary schools. Shown here are several Likert scale questionnaires to be answered by our respondents. In order to achieve the third research objective, we can compare the results obtained by achieving the first two objectives. This can be classified as a qualitative analysis of data, which uses literature reviews. Of course, there is a major quantitative element as well, where we quantify via questionnaires handed to industry professionals, students, and parents alike. This approach will justify what sorts of qualities and expectations are given from various parties towards the students. The obtained data plays a vital role in helping us determine the elements to be assessed and evaluated when grading an e-portfolio. Most importantly, we want the e-portfolio to be a manifestation of the qualities and attributes socially expected towards our secondary school students. The perception survey to be answered is to be a combination of multiple choice questions and a Likert scale. The data is also to be analyzed so that we can identify the qualities and requirements needed in the e-portfolio evaluation rubric adjusted to the Malaysian context, as well as the abilities of secondary school students. In other words, Malaysian teenagers. The last research objective can only be achieved and attained when all the previous research objectives are accomplished. It attempts to be comprehensive by evaluating the results and findings of all the previous research objectives, where all data is scrutinized to formulate an evaluation rubrics. In terms of method of data collection, the combination and comparison of qualitative and quantitative findings in this study allows me to formulate the assessment rubric for e-portfolios. As a summary, the mixed methods approach was adopted as supported by the pragmatist view, where both quantitative and qualitative techniques are allowed in order to achieve the goal of research. Okay, so that's it for my research design and my presentation. As you can see, my research is still relatively in its infancy stage and has yet to mature. And of course, there is still plenty of work to be done before we can accomplish and finish this research. And I hope I can achieve this. Thank you.